Welcome to Defacto Review, a weekly in-depth analysis of current affairs and news with our commentator and economist, Jargal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm Namsretsend. We are live on MNB World Facebook page, where you can join in on the conversation, and on Twitter via hashtag #Jargal_Defacto. And for our today's program, Toson Bumba declared specially protected area. Revolution of electronic payment. Education is not a privilege, but a right. And for today's first topic, on the 12th of August, the Prime Minister held a quick session regarding the mining operations in the Toson Bumba mountain range in the Toson region of Umnga province. A work group appointed by the Minister of Environment and Tourism determined that the company operating in this region, South Gobi Coal Trans, was in violation of their license, and this resulted in the termination of their special license. So our first question is, was the process of this license termination in accordance with the law?
Well, last week the Prime Minister had ordered to implement immediately his order to confiscate the license of that company, South Gobi Coal Trans. You should not confuse with that South Gobi Sands company, because this license before belonged to Ivanhoe Mines, which had about 100 licenses, and since 2004, and for the last 15 years, they have been selling it. And this company bought from this complex area where also South Gobi Sands have also another license. But this particular company is owned by, before it was owned by the former Finance Minister Chojo Sureng, and the territory turned out to be the naturally protected area. But two things happened. First, it was a production license, B license, and they got permission from local people, people of Bag. This is the smallest administrative unit in Mongolia, Aymag, Som, Bag. So the citizens of that Bag had agreed to produce that coal mine on their territory. But it turned out it was by the Gobi, South Gobi Aymag procureur, who made a special order in which it says that the initial permission of that Bag was fake. It was signed not signed by the people of that Bag, and because for the production permission, it turned out they need the lessons, they need the local people permission. So first that, and the second, this territory was taken as a naturally protected area in 2014, but 2017, this particular, the mine territory was taken away from the total territory of the protected area, when the owner was the minister, the current president, cabinet member and Minister of Finance. And the former Minister of Finance said that he bought it 2010 for $3.5 million that license, and invested 50 billion dogriks during this 7 years, and he sold it, he said. But however, that decisions taken away from the protected area, that territory, was also when he was the cabinet minister, then he was also making decisions on that. And so it is a conflict of interest, and it is illegal. That's what the current Prime Minister finds. And the proper other decisions were made even last year to stop that license, and in spite of all this government warnings, they have been developing. And the current CEO of the company says that they own now already 130 billion dogriks as credit to somebody else, because they have been buying things, using food, for example, on credit. So that's the situation with this mine. And on one hand, the government was given permission, the license, this de facto, de jure turned out, but de jure turned out wrong, not de jure. So that's the very difficult situation where the Prime Minister had to make that decision based on these two illegal activities, how they have been identified.
So, since this is illegal activity, should the judge have made this decision to terminate the license instead of the Prime Minister?
True. However, there is a provision in the mining law which specifies in case of the damage to the nature, etc., the license can be confiscated. But I think the former Minister of Finance, who owned that license, sold it in 2017, according to him. This person is to approach the court, apply for appeal for that government decisions, and I think this process will continue. And by that time, we will know more details about which is really actually violating the law. But I should say here that this is just the beginning of many conflict of interests happening in Mongolian government. And also the Prime Minister was raising another case where 370,000 tons of coal had disappeared from the Tavan Tolga mine. And it was two different information from customs and from the border police. And this is another case where the mining policy are so much politicized in this country, which creates a lot of conflict of interests, which makes deeper corruption in the country that is hindering our normal development in the country. So let's see when he will approach to the court with appeal of that Prime Minister's decisions.
So you said this region was part of specially protected area, and they're now again declaring it a specially protected area. So is this a right decision? Wouldn't someone just buy it again, like, since this happened once? What's stopping them to do it for the second time?
This shows very much not unclear policy of mining in the country. Either you first take naturally protected area, you specify which area is protected, then give the license. Otherwise, it happened, license is given, then this area is taken, then in this area, the particular piece that belongs to those who is making decisions taken aside. So it shows how the government, the public officers, high-ranking officials, ministers can manipulate all these decisions, which makes uncertain foreign investment to the country, and also a problem with the ecology in the area. So this is a clear indication that Mongolian mining policy is still in very much a forest. We don't understand. There are many things that is not yet clear.
So is any charges pressed against the minister who bought this land?
That will be the court decisions. I think he will go to the court with that appeal, and then the court will make a decision who is right. And plus, in particular, if he was a cabinet minister and decision is made with his presence, then it very clearly shows that it's a conflict of interest, which is against the law, because the public officers in decision makers, government members are there to protect our interests, not to protect their own interests.
You said the signatures were forged. It was not real. So if the forged signatures going through the government process,
that's correct. So that's what I said. But this is the prosecutor of South Gobi Aymak made a special order in which they describes how it was forged, how it was a fake signature. So how can one make a fake signature if it is true? That's the thing. This is the business of court to approve again. But how can the government make such a decision based on a fake signatures? That's the question we want to know more.
I see. So that was the first topic, and on to our second topic, the revolution of electronic payment project has been carried out by Mongol Bank since 2016 with financing from the Asian Development Bank. Within the frameworks of this project, works to renovate national payment systems have been conducted. Projects include reforming the National Electronic Payment Center and Interbank Transfer System, RTGS, as well as establishing infrastructure for the electronic signature of finance companies. Now they are ready to introduce a renovated low-amount transfer system that allows transfer up to 3 million tugruks to the relevant sectors. So our first question about this is that how will these new changes affect the microeconomics of Mongolia?
Macroeconomics. Any change in speed or volume of total money in the country plays an important role on the speed of the macroeconomics. Why? Because money, when it's the relevant amount of money, the volume, when it's relevant, the asset of the commercial banks close to in many countries close to the GDP level, etc. That's more or less normal banking system. There, in many countries, it's a very much underbanked economy. Very just part of the GDP equivalent money is in the circle in the country, in the economy. But we talk about the speed of turnover of money, and it's faster than it's good, because then the money, for example, in the commercial banks go, say, during a day 8 times, through 8 entities on the average. So the money in the bank and through the bank are better than those money which is not in the bank, which goes into cash, which is a case in a lot gray economy. So the turnover of money is important, and this system, current system we described, the Mongol Bank recently introduced, is important. But the question is, of course, it's Mongol Bank function to make sure that all these transactions between individuals, banks, all entities, safe and sound. But however, this infrastructure could be made by commercial banks themselves, not at the cost of the Mongol Bank. Mongol Bank is making sure that it's safe and secure. So instead of that, Mongol Bank created own infrastructure that commercial banks use altogether. And so it's kind of, which could be done by private sector, by commercial banks. Secondly, our commercial banks are so much doing own payment systems. We have 15 commercial banks, and each of them have their own system, which is very expensive, and it of course reflects in the total cost of the commercial bank. And if the commercial bank's cost is lower, then the interest rate is lower. Interest rate in Mongolia is so high, it's over 20-25% for credit, which is way expensive than the normal economy would provide. It's very hard for private companies to raise, to make a business paying 25% interest rate per annum for their loan. So on the one side, it's good news. On the other side, it is making a bit expensive commercial banks' activity.
So what are the main problems of the current system?
Well, we have over 4 million phones for 3.2 million people, and 2.8 million smartphones, which makes everybody owners of the cell phone, smartphone, making transactions through their fintech programs, etc. So sooner or later, the system is coming anyway. But now, with the current system, this one is becoming more faster transaction, up to 3 million. We call it the smaller sum of the money. And the transaction now in between banks takes certain time. Now it's almost at the same time, simultaneously. Inside of the bank, transactions were just immediately you can see transactions result. But now with this system, this one will be clear in between banks, in between different banks. And I hope this cost they pay for each transactions, for small size transactions, everybody pays 160 tugriks for every transaction to central bank. for bigger size, over 3 million, people pay, everybody pays 300 turis for transactions. And Mongol Bank is making certain revenue out of it. So, which is also a commercial aspect of the Mongol Bank. Good if it is making more safe and secure. Now, also you can use your email, your digital signature, etc., for transactions, which was not before possible.
Right. And it is believed that an underdeveloped electronic payment system is hindering the development of startup companies in IT sector. So will this new system facilitate IT startups? Will this affect it?
All these IT startups are mostly fintechs, which helps you to make transactions through your cell phone for any kind of your procurements, purchases. So you can go now anyway and purchase the item through your fintech program, through your startup program. And now the transaction will be more faster. It was so faster inside of if you do transactions within a bank, so your bank and to other account in your bank or somebody person. But now it's in between banks, which makes life of startups, in particular those startups, for example, online training or trading, and supplier company, logistics company, food delivery company. All these transactions will be much faster.
So the other nations, such as China or other nations, they use their phones. So they have this established system of online trading. So since Mongolia we only have 4G data now. So to implement this system fully, do we need more faster internet, and do we need to establish an infrastructure for this?
You see, in China, for example, they use WeChat. And in some streets in China, the beggar is putting his WeChat number to give money. So asking money to send him WeChat. So it's so easy. And we are making a direction, a step to that directions. And I think very soon Mongolians will do the same like the Chinese do with WeChat. It is not only communication platform, but also payment and transfer money, getting a lot of information, communicating to one person, a group of person. So we go to that directions. And plus soon, now in some other countries, now 5G is coming, being introduced. Now China is working very hard on that, and some other countries, and according to some provider operators, in 2 years, 5G is coming to Mongolia, and by that time, I think the payment is not going to be a problem at all in between any entities, whoever has account in the bank.
So as for small transactions, you have to pay 160, you said?
Used to have, but now with the new system, either it should be cheaper or none. So it depends on the policy, and which is not yet announced whether it will be payment or not. Most probably, because it's one of the item of revenue of Mongol Bank, and plus they are improving their own system, payment system. Probably the price will either stay there or increase because they have borrowed money from ADB to introduce this new system.
If this increased, wouldn't this just delay the usage of this? Because to pay bus money, you have to pay 600, and you just have to carry cash instead of just paying it with your phone. It's not making it easier.
But this payment system is making easier for all kind of transactions in between devices, in between banks, etc. And this is the only issue is whether it is
free or not.
Free or not? How much you pay? So this information is not available so far.
I see. So that was our second topic about the revolution of the electronic payment. Now on to our third topic. With the approach of a new academic year come the debate about the quality of education among schools and the lack of access to kindergartens. More than 50% of Mongolian population consists of children ages 0 to 29. However, A total of 46,300 children could not register for kindergarten last year. And to solve this issue, the Minister of Education initiated the Company Kindergarten project in cooperation with the private sectors. So our first question about this is that the number of children will not have access to kindergarten, of course, this year. This happens every year. So what is the government's responsibility in all this?
Well, first of all, like Mongolia is behaving here like a developed country, trying to accommodate each child into kindergarten, which is a great social achievement, of course. Why? Because if everybody, in spite of not depending on the income of families, if every kid eats normally, calorie that need for normal growth of their body and brain, it's good. This is possibly the best asset that your country has when you have healthy children. And that's why we try to accommodate, and we almost a quarter of budget spent for education and health care together, and still we cannot. For last year, 46,000 children could not have a kindergarten. But however, for this year, 2019, the government was able to create for kindergarten for 14,000, almost 13,455 kids can go to 93 kindergartens, for example, this year. With this speed, it's a matter of another 3-4 years to cover all kids into the, with the growth of population is a little bit more, but we will have a kindergarten. And this is a kind of a pleasure of privilege of many developed countries' behavior. So Mongolia is trying to do their best. Still, we have so many children outside of kindergarten system. And that's good that finally they were not giving a permission to run on kindergarten for companies now. From this year, they are giving that licenses, and also because they were probably not enough skilled teachers for that. Now, more or less, we have teachers, but the state role is to make sure that these teachers have classification, qualified to run to the kindergarten.
You wrote an article titled "Education is not a privilege but a right." So could you tell us why do you consider education to be a right?
You see, we have now private and public education system. 7% of school children goes to private schools. Half of the students go to private college and universities. So we cannot imagine without private sector the education system in the country. Only thing is high quality, good education are provided by private sector. Private schools, which is very expensive, and not everybody can afford that education. The most expensive private school, middle school, cost about $29,000 or average about $10,000, which is high by all the standards in any country. So the higher good education is becoming privilege for people who has money. Then in other schools, ordinary schools, because they have not enough money, teachers are not properly paid, and the conditions are not good. In some classes there are 45 students in their classroom, while in a private school it's less than 20 students in a classroom. And the same picture is like also in the kindergarten. So that's why high quality education should not be the only privilege of people who has money. That's why I called privilege. Education should be a right, not privilege. Of course, it has a certain character, propaganda character, I would say. But however, that's, for example, Finland has the same. Finland has a system, almost no private schools in Finland, but the quality of students are so high. Always number one or number two in the world when you have, there is called the PISA test for 15 years old students. And Finland always has either number one or number two. They are competing with Singapore. So how come that having no private schools, Finland has such achievements? So that's the thing what we need to altogether think over. The teacher are the most prestigious profession in Finland, and the country knows that the best investment is when the child is young. So even kindergarten in particular for those who has not enough income. We have 30% of the country under poverty level, which is the 30% of the children needs better education, kindergarten, they need food on time. So this kind of social issues we need to solve. That's why I regard education is not a privilege, but it is a right.
So right now, the kindergarten selection is carried out by a lottery, which is very ridiculous. And how practical is this solution?
Well, you know, the distribution of, it's market distribution actually, because the more demand, less supply, price is expensive. Or access is different. So only the right way to have access in a way, after democratic way, is this is a lottery system. So they try, it's like a way of a poor country which has no other choice. But however, it's better than any other option, this lottery, because you cannot give to all of them kindergarten, right? So if you only a part of it, in this case, for example, 1/3 of it, then that's the only solutions available and workable.
So what is actually the problem? Is they don't have the facilities or the finance to?
Actually, both. Facilities, you cannot just make a building and call it a kindergarten. Okay, even though you make a nicest building, but it's still not kindergarten. You need teachers, it is an education institution. And it's food logistics, hygiene, everything. So there's a lot works around the kindergarten. So the facility issue, quality issue, and on the other hand, it's not enough teachers and not enough also school buildings, etc., etc. All questions are combined, in particular in the areas far from the center of any kind of city or township. And so it is a matter of also equal development of whole country. And it's very expensive for a country like Mongolia, 17th largest territory for 3.2 million people. And it's very hard to develop all areas into the level that everybody has kindergarten. So we are in a dilemma. We need to be more smarter, more democratic, and government should be more better and use the limited scarce resources for the right things, something like education, healthcare, for everybody.
So would the private companies be able to, would they be able to, have the facilities and the teachers? The facility is a problem. Like teachers can be found, but they are private sectors. They need to, build a separate thing, facility.
It's good if private sector can allow it, can afford having a kindergarten. For example, if you have 80% of your employees, say you are a manufacturing company, 80% of your manufacturers, your employees are women, and say half of them have kids who needs to go to kindergarten. It's much better to have the kindergarten for them, then the mother will be working more focused, and then they will not they will be more concerned if the children are locked in their gate or house or apartments. So let them do if they can afford it.
I see. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching Defacto Review. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. One is the fund of future.